Hey guys, I will just be talking about classical conditioning today. And this is just kind of an overview of what it is and what the parts are to it. So classical conditioning does stem from behaviorism, and behaviorism tells us that we can learn more about psychology through prediction and control, and this is through interaction with the environment. And Pavlov is the one that discovered classical conditioning. He really didn't like psychology very much, and he also didn't like introspection. And this kind of gives classical conditioning that behaviorism view, how the only way to discover things is through behavior. And then I'll just quickly go over the parts of classical conditioning, which are covered really well in the lecture from this week, as well as I'm sure a lot of us have learned it through a lot of other different psychology classes as well. So the unconditioned stimulus is what leads to the automatic response. The unconditioned response is that automatic response. The conditioned stimulus was something that was neutral before, that has been paired with the unconditioned stimulus to elicit a response. And the conditioned response is the behavioral reaction to the conditioned stimulus. There's also the neutral stimulus, which doesn't produce a response. Extinction is when you have conditioned pairings that stop, and so that behavior gradually disappears. And then spontaneous recovery is when the conditioned response appears again after it hasn't been exposed for a while. So this is the classic Pavlov experiment, where there's an unconditioned stimulus of food and an unconditioned response of the dog salivating. The neutral stimulus is that bell or even the experimenter's footsteps, and that doesn't have a response at first until it's paired with the food, which produces the salivation. So then after those sounds just appear, then the salivation just happens even without the food. And I thought this was interesting because this experiment was important to Pavlov's study with secretions, and it actually helped with giving us new methods in surgery and helped him win his Nobel Prize. So this was the Little Albert experiment, another experiment of classical conditioning. It was Watson's experiment, and he's the one that founded behaviorism. I always feel bad for this poor kid. He was conditioned to fear rats. At first, he wasn't scared of them, they would just appear, but then it was paired with a lot of loud and scary noises and scary things that just terrified him. So every time he did see the rat, he became very scared. And this actually taught us a lot about phobias and fear responses, which are important to psychology. This is just some modern day application because I think it's important to apply this concept to how it's really affected psychology as a whole. And we do classical conditioning every day. We, like in high school, reacted to the bell going off, meaning we could leave. We oftentimes hear someone else's text or phone ring in public and we go to reach for our own, even though it's definitely not ours. And then there's also the subject of food aversion, where you can become sick after eating a certain food and then you really don't want to eat it after that. And like previously I had said with the Little Albert experiment, classical conditioning is used to treat phobias. So it's kind of done through therapy, and you expose that phobia as the stimulus to a person, but then you pair it with a calming response, and you do that over and over again until the person is conditioned to not be scared of whatever the phobia is. And another one I think is really important is aversion therapy and substance abuse, where it says in this picture here, you pair that substance with something bad, and the conditioned response eventually is that you experience that sickness with the substance. And then these are just my sources. So yeah, thanks guys, hope you have a good week.